Three rows of worn-out ballet slippers sat lined up against the wall in her tiny apartment, each pair a silent witness to weeks, months, and years of relentless training. Grace was her name, a fitting one, at least once upon a time, when her every step had embodied poise and fluidity. Now, those slippers looked more like relics of a past life than companions on her journey. She ran her hand over the soft satin ribbons of her newest shoes, ones she had barely used since her last audition. It pained her to think of how, at 26, she might have already reached the twilight of a career that had yet to truly begin. But there she was, alone in that cramped space, doubting her every potential and questioning her purpose. She remembered the moment she first fell in love with ballet. She'd been a shy 9-year-old, awkward in school, but suddenly fearless at the bar. Her instructor at the time had seen something in her, a raw presence, a rare kind of devotion. Over the next decade, the stage became her friend and the dance hall her sanctuary, a place where everything made sense. She thrived under the bright lights and warmed to the gentle applause that followed her solo performances. But after an injury to her knee one fateful evening, the crisp pirouettes and grand jetés that used to come easily began to feel fragile. Despite therapy and rest, a small voice in her mind kept reminding her that her body was no longer the same. For a while, she tried to push through. She forced herself to take advanced classes, punishing every slight imperfection. Perfection, after all, had been her guiding star. Yet the more she pressed forward, the more her body resisted. Nerves clouded her performances, a series of auditions, each heartbreakingly close but ultimately stack up to rejections, sapped her confidence and drained her wallet. Bills needed to be paid, and supportive artistry didn't always come with financial stability. It was her mother's voice on the phone that finally made Grace set aside her pride and look for a part-time job. "You can't keep living off late-night ramen," her mother had said. "Find another way to stay afloat while you figure things out." By day, she typed data in a musty office basement. The fluorescent lights flickered while the hum of the air conditioning was an indifferent lullaby. By night, she tried to force herself to practice, but each time she pulled on her leotard, something weighed on her heart. The reflection in the studio mirror showed a once beaming dancer now governed by a swirl of doubt. She used to feel the music resonate through her soul. Now every plié felt forced, every lift reluctant. It seemed the dream she had once held so vividly had slipped away into a numb routine, and that sense of emptiness lingered for months, until an unexpected encounter at the community center brought a spark back into her life. She'd gone there to drop off a form for a volunteer program at the insistence of her friend Samantha. Sam worked in the center's youth development department and often joked, "If you won't dance for yourself anymore, dance for somebody else." Grace had rolled her eyes, but eventually agreed to meet her after work. On the day of her visit, she observed a small crowd of children, some playing in the courtyard. They wore mismatched clothing with holes at the knees, yet had unrestrained smiles. A few chased each other around with the kind of joy that seemed alien to her adult perspective. Sam guided Grace through the worn hallways lined with tattered posters announcing after-school programs. An old piano stood near the entrance to a multi-purpose room, the keys dulled from years of use. Inside, the walls needed a fresh coat of paint and the floors squeaked with every step. Yet there, sitting on foldable chairs, were nearly a dozen children, each glancing shyly at Grace with wide, curious eyes. Sam introduced them. "Everyone, this is my friend Grace. She's a professional dancer." The moment Sam said dancer, Grace felt a knot in her stomach. A professional dancer was the one she used to be, not who she felt she was anymore. But the children didn't see her doubts. They saw someone introducing them to possibility. They were in desperate need of a ballet teacher to round out the youth program. The center couldn't afford to hire one, so Sam pressed Grace to volunteer. "Just do it once a week," suggested Sam gently. "These kids need something to get excited about, an activity that can help them build discipline and confidence. You'll be perfect." At first, Grace hesitated. She was searching for something to fill the hole in her own heart. How could she help build up others when she could barely face herself in the mirror? Nonetheless, seeing the cost-free nature of the program and meeting those hopeful children left a mark on her. She felt compelled to say yes, albeit with lingering trepidation. Her first lesson was anything but perfect. Half the children had never taken a dance class in their lives, and the other half didn't seem to know what a plie was or even how to point their toes. Grace started with the absolute basics: posture, balance, and how to hold their arms gently. She showed them simple stretches she'd learned as a child, encouraging them to push a little further each time, but always remain safe. Some children lost focus quickly, squirming impatiently. Others were enthralled, hanging on to her every instruction. One little girl named Lily tugged on Grace's hand after class. "Teacher, am I too clumsy to be a dancer?" she asked, her hazel eyes full of worry. Grace knelt down so their gazes met. "I used to feel that way sometimes," she admitted. "But ballet is about practice, dedication, and love for movement. If you love it, keep trying." Lily nodded as if she'd been given the biggest secret to unlocking the universe. After Lily left, Grace packed up the battered music player and wondered if her words also applied to herself. Perhaps she needed to keep trying too. Over the following weeks, she discovered that teaching these children offered something that soared beyond the feeling of being on stage by herself. Their progress was painfully slow at first. An entire class might be spent on how to pivot from one foot to the other gracefully, but with every class, a new closeness grew between Grace and each of her students. She began to notice that they had tiny victories. One day, a shy boy nailed the timing on a simple step sequence. The next day, Lily managed to stay balanced on her toes for a few seconds without wobbling. When the children succeeded, they glowed as if they'd just conquered a fear. Grace found herself beaming at them, feeling their achievements as if they were her own. She couldn't help but recall her temperamental days training in fancy studios under strict Russian instructors who demanded near flawless execution. Losing her sense of enjoyment had come slowly, overshadowed by the race for perfection. Now, in this low-ceilinged, battered community center, she rediscovered the playful spirit at the heart of dance. She wasn't teaching them how to become prima ballerinas overnight. She was teaching them how to become good at something through respect for the art and for themselves. And in turn, her own perspective on dance began to shift from the excruciating demands of professional ballet to the joys of movement and creativity itself. Some evenings, she found herself in her apartment, practicing the same basic steps she taught the children. She recited the instructions in her head, imagining how she would explain each position. In doing so, she revisited the fundamentals of ballet that she'd once taken for granted. It wasn't that she forgot them, but she'd buried them under layers of polished, advanced technique. Stripping her artistry back to the foundation felt like reconnecting with a younger version of herself. The girl so eager to learn and so in awe of every new move, an unfamiliar warmth filled her heart, supplying a sense of wonder she'd thought was lost long ago. One afternoon, Grace decided to bring in a simple choreography she'd arranged herself. She'd adapted an accessible piece from Tchaikovsky's Sleeping Beauty, one that the students could manage with slow, deliberate steps. She had low expectations for the group. After all, these children had barely known what ballet was a couple of months ago, but they approached the piece with wide smiles and a level of commitment that delighted her. Even the usually restless ones tried hard to remain focused. For some minutes, the squeaking floor was replaced by the sounds of gentle music emanating from the tinny speaker and the gentle shuffle of sneakers. Most of the kids didn't have real ballet shoes. Their excitement grew as they learned to move in unison, more or less, and ended in a whimsical pose with arms held above their heads. After the music faded, the children burst into cheers, clapping for one another and for Grace. A few parents, waiting outside in the corridor, peeked in and grinned at the sight. Grace felt her chest swell with pride. She remembered the sensation of applause echoing in grand theaters, but somehow this small wave of applause in a rundown community center felt infinitely more meaningful. Here, every clap came from a genuine place. She saw Lily bowing in earnest, and her heart melted. Could it be that this was what dance was supposed to mean? Touching souls, not just entertaining? That night, Grace couldn't switch off her thoughts. Her days at the office still dragged, but the evenings with her dance kids, as she privately called them, were lighting a spark in her that had long been forgotten. She pulled out an old scrapbook filled with photos of her adolescent performances, letters from instructors praising her skill and dedication, and a Polaroid shot of her younger self in tattered pink slippers, grinning ear to ear. It was the innocence in that grin that she wanted to reclaim, the simple joy that came from letting her body speak through movement. She started to arrive at the community center early, turning on the music and warming up her own body. Sometimes Sam would wander in and watch her from the doorway. "You look alive again," she observed one evening. The word struck Grace. Yes, she did feel more alive. Her body was still far from peak condition, but she no longer dreaded pulling on her leotard or lacing up her shoes. She also started to notice less tension in her knee, possibly because she was moving more organically and focusing on basics rather than punishing it with advanced combinations too soon. One particular day, as she gathered the children in a circle, Sam walked into the classroom with an apologetic look. The annual community arts fair was in a month, and Sam wanted to ask if Grace's kids might put on a short performance. Each class in the center usually performed something, a skit or a dance, but the staff wasn't sure the new ballet group was ready. "You don't have to," Sam said quietly. "We know it's short notice." But whispers had spread among the kids that they might get to show their parents and friends what they had learned. Their excitement was palpable, and Grace realized turning down the opportunity would squelch that spark they'd been building. She took a breath, remembering how every performance used to throw her into a swirl of anxiety. But she looked at their expectant stares and suddenly felt courage. "We'll do it," she said softly. "We'll perform." The children erupted into cheers, and Sam gave her an encouraging thumbs up, though his face implied he was a bit worried about the short preparation time. From then on, the next 4 weeks turned into a whirlwind of practice sessions. Grace chose a straightforward piece that combined short passages from classical solos into an arrangement suitable for the group's skill level. She taught them how to hold their arms elegantly, how to step in unison, and how to keep their heads high. She coached Lily on letting her face reflect the music and persuaded the restless ones to channel their energy into precise footwork. They laughed at their own mistakes, stumbling occasionally, but they always tried again. If a step was missed, they repeated it until they got it right. The children learned the value of discipline and, equally important, the art of resilience. When Grace was alone, she found herself practicing the same piece, if only to understand how best to clarify the transitions for the group. Each time she did a move, something about the old spark returned. She could sense the layers of self-imposed criticism peeling away. The simpler movements felt like they carried their own grace. She was coming to terms with the fact that dance wasn't just about how high she could leap or how many turns she could do. It was about expression, about pouring your heart into every subtle gesture. The day of the community arts fair arrived, bustling with families and children from all different classes, painting, theater, singing, and more. The stage was a makeshift platform in the center's modest auditorium, lit by two old spotlights that flickered unpredictably if someone tapped the wrong power cord. Grace's students hovered backstage, some fidgeting nervously, some adjusting their hair, but all of them brimming with excitement. They were wearing donated ballet outfits that came in varying shades of white and pink, many slightly too big or too small. Colored, some wore borrowed slippers, a few in socks, yet none of that dampened their enthusiasm. Grace knelt down to gather them around before their turn. She spoke softly. "I'm so proud of how far you've come. All of you. Let's just do our best, have fun, and share what we love with everyone watching." The children nodded, biting their lips or giggling nervously. They filed onto the stage, forming their initial positions under the modest lights. As the music began, Grace stood in the wings, counting the beats in her head. She watched them execute their steps, albeit with a few minor missteps and uneven timing here and there. But their faces glowed with a joy that overshadowed any technical flaw. Lily spun with such earnestness, reaching her arms overhead with a smile that could melt hearts. Halfway through, Grace stepped out to perform a brief solo passage she had somehow found the courage to rehearse. The children parted to either side, letting her move to center stage, their eyes shining with pride in their teacher. The music slowed to a delicate phrase, and she lifted her arms as though they were wings unfurling for the first time in years. The audience hushed. Grace felt her body respond, guided not by the pursuit of perfection, but by the simple desire to dance. She glided through each step, heart pounding, not out of anxiety, but out of dedication to the people who had reignited her passion. The applause that followed was immediate and genuine, a ripple of approval that carried through the small auditorium. When the music ended, the children joined her in their final pose. Applause filled the room again, louder this time, and Grace felt tears sting at the corner of her eyes. Each child took a bow, beaming from ear to ear. She bowed last, feeling a sense of completion she hadn't felt in years. Stepping off stage, they erupted into chaotic giggles and embraced one another. Some parents hurried over with phone cameras, capturing the moment for posterity. It wasn't the opulent stage she'd once dreamt of conquering, but it may have been the best performance she ever had, because it was filled with pure, untainted love for the art. Afterward, the principal at the community center approached Grace, praising her for her incredible volunteer work. "We've never seen our kids this engaged, thank you." He offered her the chance to continue teaching. He also mentioned trying to secure funding to pay her at least a small stipend for her devotion. Then, Sam told her about a friend who ran a youth dance company in a neighboring city. They often invited guest teachers to conduct workshops, especially for students who couldn't afford private lessons. "I could pass on your name," Sam proposed. Grace was momentarily taken aback. She had always thought of teaching as a fallback, never as a central path. But now, the idea that she could inspire more children and keep ballet alive in communities that lacked resources filled her with purpose. A couple of days after the fair, Grace met Lily's mother, who shyly handed her a small envelope. "I can't ever repay what you've done for Lily," she said. "She's more confident now, more excited about the future. Thank you." Inside the envelope was a handwritten note from Lily, complete with a child's drawing of Grace dancing on a stage with hearts floating around. At the bottom, Lily had written, "You are the best dancer in the world because you make us believe we can dance too." Those words brought tears to Grace's eyes. She taped the note to her bedroom mirror at home, in the spot she once reserved for rejection letters. Now, instead of seeing her failures, she would see this affirmation every morning. There were still challenges ahead. Grace knew that her knee would always need careful attention, that opportunities to perform in a professional company might remain elusive. But she also realized that her life had taken a turn she wouldn't trade. She loved those children. She loved seeing their excitement when they conquered a new move. She found delight in music that transcended the boundaries constraining her. She learned that the real measure of her success wasn't the number of ballets she starred in, but the lives she touched with her passion. At times, she thought back on those anxious years of intense training, remembering the tension in her body and the unrelenting weight of expectations. All of that had overshadowed her original love for dance. She saw now that her skill was not lost. It was just buried under her own disappointment. Working with underprivileged children had stripped away her fear of judgment, leaving her face to face with the essence of ballet. The sheer joy of movement, the power of expression, and the connection that forms when hearts and music align. A few weeks later, Grace accepted Sam's offer. She began teaching a series of weekend workshops, traveling around to different community centers and youth clubs. With every new group, she recounted her own journey, albeit mindful not to burden them with her struggles, and encouraged them to explore dance in their own ways. She taught them that discipline comes from respect for your own body, that perseverance is fueled by love, and that every dancer discovers both the heights of confidence and the valleys of doubt. Just as she had done at her first volunteer class, Grace knelt before wide-eyed students, reassuring them that clumsiness and missteps are only stepping stones, not the end of the path. It didn't take long for the word to spread. There was a young dancer named Grace who had a knack for inspiring children. Donations came in for more shoes, small grants became available for costumes, and the program began to grow. Grace found herself busier than ever, juggling her part-time office job lists, soul-crushing now that she looked forward to her dance sessions, and her blossoming mission of mentorship. She discovered a sense of fulfillment she had never felt before, which helped her let go of the heartbreak of not dancing as a principal on a grand stage. Perhaps she would still audition for certain roles in the future, but her identity no longer hinged on the acceptance or rejection of a ballet company. One evening, back at her familiar community center, she held a small advanced session for a handful of students who showed exceptional promise. Lily was among them, her lithe frame now more controlled and her eyes even more determined. As the group worked through a tricky combination of balances and turns, Grace saw in them the reflection of the fierce ambition she once had. But she also saw something else, pure enjoyment. They teased each other, corrected each other's arm placement, and delivered high fives after nailing a particularly difficult sequence in unison. This was ballet as it should be, Grace thought, supportive and uplifting. When the class finished, Lily looked up shyly. "Teacher, will we perform again soon?" Grace chuckled. "We'll keep performing as long as we can. The city's holiday festival is coming up in a couple of months, so get ready for auditions." The children squealed with excitement, filling her with a secondhand thrill. Again, she felt that warm wave in her chest, the soothing knowledge that the cycle of passion, practice, and sharing was continuing. In the days that followed, Grace began practicing a short solo for that upcoming holiday festival. She made no grand announcements about it, not even to Sam. She wanted to see if she still had it in her, to test her growing confidence on a stage for an audience beyond just her students. Every time she rehearsed, she recalled the reason she danced, to convey emotion, to celebrate the freedom that movement brings. She also heard the echoes of Lily's note, reminding her that the greatest dancer isn't the one with the most flawless technique, but the one who evokes hope and belief in others. As she worked on the piece, she noticed that her hesitations had mostly disappeared. She might never be immaculate in technique, but she felt an emotional clarity in each line of her body. She realized that the weight of expectation was gone. It was enough to be present, giving everything her heart could muster. Perhaps that was the elusive, pure form of grace she'd been missing all along. Her name, which once felt ironic, was becoming emblematic of the new synergy she had forged between her past dreams and present reality, between her struggles and her calling to elevate others. The day of the festival arrived with chilly winter winds and swirling lights all around the city square. Families crowded together, wearing coats and scarves, huddling near makeshift heaters to watch an array of performers. Grace's students did their group number first, drawing cheers from the onlookers. She waved encouragingly at them, feeling immensely proud. Then she took her place backstage as volunteers set up the next segment. When the lights fell upon her, she exhaled and stepped forward. The music began, a gentle piano leitmotif that grew into a melodic swirl. She didn't launch into any complicated leaps or turns that might test her knee too severely. Instead, she let the music guide her in fluid arcs, allowing her arms to sweep elegantly and her legs to extend gently. Unconstrained by the memory of injuries or rejections, she made each move with intention, as if telling a story through her limbs. Looking across the dimly lit audience, she spotted Lily and her classmates watching in awe. That awareness made her smile softly, and she finished her piece with a graceful bow. The applause came in waves, a reaction not just to her dance, but also the aura of peace and devotion she conveyed. Stepping off the stage, she felt a rush of contentment that glowed from deep within. She understood that her life had been redirected for a reason. She was still a dancer, but more importantly, she had become a mentor, a guide who used ballet to uplift young souls. Her ephemeral heartbreak over not becoming a star dancer on a grand stage seemed less important now. She had found a stage of her own creation, one that extended beyond city lights to the hearts of those who had never considered ballet accessible. After the performance, Lily ran to her and threw her arms around her waist. "That was so beautiful," Lily exclaimed. The other kids soon followed, each offering excited words of congratulations. Sam approached with a grin, a tear in his eye. "You've come a long way," he murmured. Grace just nodded, feeling grateful and renewed. She realized then that passion, once lost, can be reignited in unexpected ways. She had nearly buried herself in disillusionment, ready to surrender her dancing shoes for good. But through witnessing the joy of children who had so little, she found the reason she had always loved ballet in the first place. It was her way of bringing light into the world, one graceful step at a time. And in teaching them, she rediscovered the path that led her back to herself.